Hello everyone. Today I want to present a game that I played more than 1 year ago against Stolzengold. That is a player rated 1837, and it's a game on the Benko Gambit. The Benko Gambit is d4, knight f6, c4, c5, d5, b5, and there are many variations of the Benko Gambit. In this game we will see the fully accepted variation that continue with c takes b5, a6, b takes a6, bishop take a6, and here a lot of players played knight to d2 because later when they will push the e-pawn after the bishop takes f1, they can recapture with the knight instead of the king. But in this game my opponent played knight c3, and I continued with d6, and he played e3, and I captured the bishop. Bishop takes f1, and the king is compelled to take my bishop, using the possibility to castle later. I played g6, planning to fianchetto this bishop, knight ge2, and my opponent face another problem, the development of this rook, because the king block the way to develop of this rook. The knight is go away very easily, but the king need a safe square to go. We will see later how my opponent will solve this problem. I played bishop g7 and my opponent played g3, and this is the idea that my opponent had. Now g2 is available for the king, and the rook is free to develop. So the game continues with my castle, a3, knight b d7, and king g2, leaving space for the rook, queen c7, and a4. My opponent pushes the a pawn 2 times, and it's a bit strange, but I think he wanted to control the b5 square, this square, for the knight, because it's a good place for the knight. Rook fb8, putting pressure on this pawn because it's attacked directly by my rook and indirectly by my bishop, so it defended with queen c2, and I played queen b7, putting more pressure here, and now my queen is in the same diagonal of the king, the opponent king, and we will see later how this will help me. e4, because this pawn was under attack, my queen attacked it and even my knight. Knight g4, aiming to go on e5, and knight b5, reducing the pressure on the b pawn. Knight b6, attacking this pawn, and my threat is now to capture. Knight takes a4, rook takes a4, rook takes a4, queen takes a4, and queen takes b5, win a pawn. So my opponent played h3, attacking my knight, and now my variation didn't work because after knight takes a4, rook takes a4, rook takes a4, queen takes a4, queen takes b5, h takes g4, and I lose a piece for a pawn, and this is not good for me. So I played knight e5 first, and now my opponent defended the pawn with b3, and now I played the move that I think win the game. It's a tactical move, knight takes d5, because my opponent can't take back with the pawn, because for instance if e takes d5, now queen takes d5 check, and the pawn block didn't work, because after knight takes f3 my threat is now to play knight to d4 check, winning the queen. So my opponent need to move the king, but now I simply win the rook for free. So that's not possible. The pawn block is not possible, and my opponent is compelled to move his queen because his king, because there aren't a piece that can block the check. So for instance king f1 is not possible, because queen takes h1 check is devastating. The only square available are g1 and h2. Let's say h2, and here I played knight f3 check. King g2 is the only square, and knight d4 check, win the queen. So we saw that my opponent in this situation can't take back with this pawn. In fact, my opponent played bishop d2, and here I played f5 because I wanted to remove this pawn and attack the king with my queen and my knights.